For 9 months, Cole Morrow told himself his wife had simply left him. It was easier than the alternative. It was also, as it turned out, exactly what someone had needed him to believe. If this opening already has the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, good. Stay with me. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think love can survive the kind of betrayal this story is about to show you? I read every single comment. Welcome message. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. I am Mr. Zaha. Thanks for tuning in today. A kind words from a man who has seen it all. Marriage are not mostly bed of roses. Sometime you need more of. More of what? Can't say. Continue watching, and you will surely know what to do in situations like this. Kindly hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So let's get started. The morning Elena Morrow disappeared, she made coffee. Cole would think about that later, in the weeks and months of her absence, in the terrible, grinding machinery of not knowing. He would think about that specific, ordinary detail with the particular anguish of a man cataloging the last evidence of a person's existence. She had made coffee. The carafe had been full and still warm when Detective Sandra Pierce arrived at the house at 11 that morning. The coffee had still been there, untouched in the pot, going cold on the burner, because Elena had made it, and then she had gone, and nobody had been home to drink it. He had not been home. He had been, on that Tuesday morning in January, in a suite at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Austin, Texas, with a woman named Serena Voss. He had been there when his wife made coffee in the kitchen of their home in Westlake Hills, their 7-bedroom estate on 2 acres above the city, the house Elena had spent 2 years making into the most beautiful home Cole had ever lived in. He had been there when Elena had apparently, based on the evidence the investigators would later reconstruct, received a phone call. He had been there when she had, for reasons that would remain unclear for 9 months, walked out of that house and into the cold January morning and disappeared from his life entirely. He had been with Serena. He would carry that fact for a long time. He would carry it like something with weight and edges, the kind of thing you cannot set down no matter how badly your arms ache. Cole Morrow was 42 years old, founder and executive chairman of Morrow Technologies, an Austin-based tech and defense contracting firm that the Texas Business Review had most recently valued at $6.8 billion. He had built it from a single government software contract he'd won at 31, fresh out of a master's program at UT Austin, running the company from a rented office in South Austin with 3 employees and a conviction so absolute it had occasionally been mistaken for arrogance. It had not been arrogance. It had been vision. There was a difference, though Cole had spent much of his career understanding that the world would not always make it. He was a compact, dark-haired man with the kind of physical stillness that reads as intensity, the quality of someone whose mind was always moving faster than his face let on. He had grown up in Beaumont, Texas, the son of a refinery worker and a school librarian, and the combination of those two inheritances, his father's understanding of systems and pressure, his mother's understanding of narrative and consequence, had given him a mind that was both structural and intuitive, capable of seeing the architecture of a situation and the human story inside it simultaneously. He was, by most measurable accounts, exceptional. He was also, in the season leading up to his wife's disappearance, a man who had made a catastrophic decision and had been managing the consequences of it with a compartmentalization so practiced it had become almost invisible to him, the way a structural flaw becomes invisible when you've been spackling over it long enough. He had met Elena Walsh at a technology summit in San Francisco 5 years ago. She was 31 to his 37, a forensic accountant with a boutique firm that specialized in corporate fraud investigation, a profession that suited her in the way that the right work suits certain people, work that matches not just their skill set, but their fundamental character. Elena had a mind like a fine instrument, precise and patient, capable of finding the single dishonest thread in 1,000 pages of legitimate numbers and pulling it until the whole false construction came apart. She was meticulous and quiet and possessed of a dry, precise humor that ambushed you when you weren't expecting it, and that Cole had found, from the first evening, completely irresistible. She was not the most immediately commanding person in a room. She was the kind of person who became more extraordinary the longer you looked, which was, Cole had always thought, the better kind. The kind that rewarded attention. He had paid attention. At the summit, at dinner afterward, in the weeks of phone calls and the cross-country visits that followed. He had paid attention with the full, focused investment of a man who understood value and had just encountered something exceptional. They were married in a small ceremony in the Texas Hill Country 18 months after the summit. Limestone and wildflowers in October light. 40 guests. Elena in a simple ivory dress that she had found in a vintage shop in Nashville, and that was, somehow, the most beautiful thing Cole had ever seen. His best man, his college roommate Derek Hayes, had leaned over during the vows and said quietly, "She's the best thing that's ever happened to you." And Cole had said, without looking away from Elena, "I know." He had known. For 3 years, he had known it completely and lived accordingly. Present, invested, building something with her that was more than the sum of its considerable parts. And then the business had entered a critical expansion phase, and the pressure had intensified, and he had made the first in a series of incremental choices that led, by the accumulation of small surrenders, to a man sleeping in a hotel suite on a Tuesday morning while his wife made coffee alone in their kitchen for the last time. Serena Voss had come into Cole's professional orbit 14 months before Elena disappeared. She was 34, a senior vice president at a Dallas-based defense lobbying firm, Meridian Strategies, that Morrow Technologies had engaged for government relations work on a major Pentagon contract. She was tall and precise and aggressive in the particular way of people who had decided, early, that the world responded to force and had never had sufficient reason to revise that assessment. She was brilliant at her work, the kind of political strategist who understood leverage and relationship architecture in ways that made her genuinely valuable at the specific table where Cole needed her. She was also, in ways that Cole would only fully understand 9 months after Elena's disappearance, a woman who had decided what she wanted and had never, in her 34 years, permitted anything to stand between herself and the thing she wanted. The affair had begun 8 months before Elena disappeared, at a work dinner in Dallas that had extended past midnight into a conversation that crossed a line Cole had recognized in the moment of crossing and had crossed anyway. The first compromise, the first small surrender, the one that, looking back, contained all the subsequent ones the way a first domino contains the entire sequence of its fall. He had told himself it was separate. That was always the story, the compartmentalization, the convincing internal narrative that the two parts of a divided life could coexist without contaminating each other. He had told himself that what happened with Serena did not diminish what he had with Elena, which was the specific lie that men in his position told themselves and which was, he would later understand, the most expensive lie he had ever believed. Elena had not known. He was nearly certain of that. Nearly, with the caveat that Elena was a forensic accountant who found hidden things for a living, and that the word nearly had been doing an enormous amount of structural work in his internal narrative for 8 months. He had been meaning to end it with Serena. He had been meaning to end it for approximately 6 of the 8 months it had been happening. He had not ended it. And on the Tuesday morning in January when he lay in the Four Seasons suite while his wife made coffee alone in Westlake Hills, he had been telling himself, as he had told himself the previous dozen mornings in similar circumstances, that he would end it soon. This week, after the Pentagon contract closed, when the pressure eased, there was always a reason. There was always a next week. His phone rang at 9:47. He was in the shower. He saw the missed call when he got out, Elena's number. He stared at it for a moment with the particular guilty awareness of a man seeing his wife's name on his phone in circumstances that made the sight of it complicated. He called back. It rang 8 times and went to voicemail. He left a message. "Hey, just saw I missed you. Call me back. Hope you're having a good morning." The voice of a man performing normalcy with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing it for 8 months. She did not call back. At noon, he called again. Voicemail. At 2 in the afternoon, he called Derek Hayes, his best man, his oldest friend, who lived 10 minutes from Cole and Elena's house in Westlake Hills, and asked him to drive by the house. "I can't reach Elena. Probably nothing. Her phone dies all the time. Just want to make sure she's okay." Derek called back in 20 minutes. "Cole," Derek said, and his voice had a quality in it that Cole felt before he understood. "Her car's here. Front door is unlocked. Coffee's on. She's not here." Cole was already reaching for his jacket. "Call the police," he said. "I'm on my way home." He drove the 3 hours from Austin to Westlake Hills in 2 hours and 19 minutes. He would not sleep properly again for 9 months. Detective Sandra Pierce of the Austin Police Department was 48, methodical, and possessed of the particular professional composure of a woman who had investigated enough missing persons cases to understand that the first 72 hours were everything, and that the people left behind were simultaneously the most important resource and the most volatile element of any investigation. She arrived at the Morrow estate at 11 that Tuesday morning, and by the time Cole pulled up at 2:15, she had already walked the property, interviewed Derek Hayes, reviewed the security camera footage from the estate's external cameras, which showed Elena leaving through the front door at 8:53 in the morning in her coat and boots, no bag, her phone in her hand, walking down the driveway and turning left onto the road, and formed a preliminary assessment that she delivered to Cole in the kitchen, beside the coffee that was still sitting cold in the pot, with the direct, careful honesty of a professional who did not believe in managing people's emotions at the expense of their right to information. She left voluntarily, based on the footage, Sanders said. No signs of struggle inside the house. She had her phone, no purse, no luggage. Whatever caused her to leave happened fast, possibly in response to something. A call, a message. She paused. Mr. Morrow, was there anything going on between you and your wife? Any conflict? Any reason she might have chosen to leave? Cole looked at her. He thought about the Four Seasons suite. About Serena. About 8 months of a second life he had been running alongside the one that was represented by this kitchen, this coffee pot, this woman who had walked out of the front door at 8:53 in the morning. No, he said. Nothing. He would regret that answer for a long time. Not because it was entirely false. There had been no argument, no confrontation, nothing that Elena had known about that would have sent her walking out the door without her purse. But because it was the answer of a man protecting himself at the moment he should have been protecting his wife. He would sit with that for 9 months. He would sit with it for much longer than that. The first week produced nothing. Cell phone last pinged a tower 2 miles from the house at 9:06 on Tuesday morning, 13 minutes after she'd walked off the camera. After that, silence. The phone either powered down or was powered down for her. Her bank accounts showed no activity. Her car remained in the driveway. Her passport was in the desk drawer in the home office, untouched. There were no witnesses. No one had seen her on the road. No one had seen a car stop. The January morning had been cold and gray, and the neighborhood had been, as Westlake Hills neighborhoods tended to be at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday, largely empty. Elena Morrow had walked off a security camera and into nothing. By the end of the first week, Sandra Pierce had 2 working theories, and she had shared neither of them with Cole because she was a careful woman who did not traffic in speculation. By the end of the second week, the story had been picked up by the Austin media, then the Texas media, then the national outlets. Billionaire's wife vanishes in Austin, the headlines read, with the specific, slightly salivating quality of news organizations that understood that wealth and mystery in combination produced a story people would read. And through all of it, the investigation, the press, the search volunteers Derek organized, the anguished phone calls with Elena's mother Patricia Walsh in Nashville and her brother James Walsh in Denver. Cole Morrow stood at the center of the storm and functioned. He cooperated with the police. He hired a private investigator, the best in Texas, a former FBI agent named Thomas Briggs. He gave press statements and offered rewards and did every visible, documentable thing a man in his position should do. And Serena Voss called him every day. She was supportive, present, concerned in all the right ways, at all the right moments. She came to Austin twice in the first month, ostensibly for work, staying at a hotel, maintaining the appearance of professional separation that the circumstances now made newly necessary. She said the right things. She was steady in a way he found, in the fog of those early weeks, genuinely sustaining. He did not end the affair. He would understand, later, the full significance of that in the worst season of his life, in the face of his wife's disappearance, he had reached toward the woman who was the source of his deepest moral failure and found comfort there, rather than reckoning. He would understand it later. For now, he was simply a man trying to survive the weight of not knowing. He was also, without yet understanding it, a man being managed. The human mind, under sustained grief, does something remarkable and terrible simultaneously. It adapts. Cole Morrow had built a company worth nearly $7 billion on his ability to function under pressure. He had sat across negotiating tables from Pentagon generals and Senate committee chairs, and the kind of private equity partners whose entire professional identity was constructed around making other people feel small, and he had never once lost his composure in a way that cost him anything he couldn't afford to lose. He had believed, in some unexamined part of himself, that this capacity for composure was a character trait, something structural, load-bearing, definitional. He understood, in the weeks after Elena disappeared, that he had been wrong. What he had been doing in those boardrooms was not composure. It was performance. And the difference between the two only becomes clear when the stakes are no longer financial. When the thing you stand to lose is not a contract or a margin or a market position, but a person. The specific, irreplaceable, coffee-making reality of a person who is simply gone. He did not sleep properly for the first 3 weeks. He moved through the days in a state that felt like being submerged, everything slightly muffled, slightly slowed, the ordinary machinery of the world continuing to operate around him with a cheerfulness that struck him, in his worst moments, as obscene. He cooperated with everything. Sandra Pierce's team conducted 2 full sweeps of the property, interviewed every neighbor within a half-mile radius, canvassed the road Elena had walked down, spoke to the drivers of every vehicle that could be identified as having been in the area that Tuesday morning. Thomas Briggs, the private investigator Cole had retained at a fee that would have financed a small startup, ran parallel lines of inquiry with the thoroughness of a man who had spent 22 years in the FBI, learning that the most important things were almost always the things people assumed were irrelevant. The phone records were subpoenaed. Elena's call log showed a call received at 8:47 that morning, 6 minutes before she walked out of the house. The number was a prepaid phone, purchased with cash at a convenience store in South Austin 2 weeks earlier, and never used again after that single call. Elena's phone had pinged its last tower at 9:06, and then gone dark, either powered down or physically destroyed. No ransom demand came. No communication of any kind. She was simply gone, with the completeness of a vanishing that felt, to Cole, in his worst hours, 3 in the morning, standing in the kitchen looking at the spot where the coffee maker sat, less like a disappearance and more like an erasure. The prepaid phone is significant, Thomas Briggs told him, in the 3rd week, sitting across the kitchen island in the Westlake Hills house. Briggs was 61, gray-haired, and had the contained, precise manner of a man who treated information the way a surgeon treated an open chest, carefully, without excess. Someone planned this. Whatever happened to Elena, someone prepared for it in advance. The question is whether Elena was cooperating with that preparation, or whether someone else was. What does the evidence say? Cole asked. The evidence says she received a call, left without her purse or her luggage, and her phone was subsequently disabled. Those facts are consistent with 2 very different scenarios. Briggs looked at him steadily. In one scenario, Elena arranged to meet someone she trusted. In the other, someone told her something on that call that gave her no choice but to walk out that door. Cole thought about Elena, her precision, her stillness, the quality of her attention, the way she noticed things. She didn't leave voluntarily, he said. It came out with a certainty he hadn't planned. Briggs studied him for a moment. What makes you say that? Because if Elena had decided to leave me, Cole said, she wouldn't have left without her purse. Briggs wrote something in his notebook. It was the truest thing Cole said in those early months. It was also, without his knowing it, the beginning of a thread. Serena called every day. He understood, later, how precisely calibrated this was, the frequency, the tone, the specific architecture of her support. At the time, it registered as comfort. She was consistent in a season of total inconsistency. She said the right things at the right moments, and she did not demand anything of him, which was its own form of relief when everything else in his life was demanding something. She came to Austin twice in the first month, 3 times in the second. The visits were brief and ostensibly professional. Meridian Strategies still had an active contract with Morrow Technologies, which provided cover, and Serena was skilled at cover in ways that Cole was not yet equipped to recognize. She did not push for anything more than he was offering. She was patient in the way of someone who has decided to play a long game and is genuinely comfortable with the length of it. She listened to him talk about Elena with an attention that he found, in his fog, generous, and which was, In fact, something else entirely. Derek Hayes watched all of it with the particular helplessness of a best friend who can see something clearly and cannot make the person he loves see it with him. "She's calling you every day?" Derek said, 2 months in. They were sitting on Cole's back porch in the January cold, neither of them particularly invested in being comfortable, which was its own kind of ritual, the suffering through it together quality of male grief. "She's being supportive. She's the woman you were with when your wife disappeared." "I know that." Cole's voice came out harder than he intended. Derek was quiet for a moment. "I'm not judging you, man. I'm really not. He stopped. Started again. "I just want to make sure you're seeing clearly. Because right now I'm not sure any of us are." Cole said nothing. He was not seeing clearly. He would understand that later, with the precision of hindsight. The way you can see the exact moment in a photograph where the light began to go wrong when you're looking at it afterward. But in the photograph itself, in the living of it, the light simply was what it was, and you moved through it as best you could. He was not seeing clearly. And Serena Voss knew exactly what she was doing. By the 3rd month, a theory had begun to crystallize in the investigation. Not publicly. Sandra Pierce was not a woman who shared unconfirmed theories publicly, and Thomas Briggs was constitutionally incapable of speculation. But privately, in the evidence matrix that Briggs maintained in a dedicated room at his office in downtown Austin, a room Cole had visited twice and found simultaneously reassuring and devastating, because the evidence of Elena's existence spread across those boards was simultaneously proof that she had been real and a measurement of how completely she had vanished. Something was beginning to take shape. There had been a second phone, not Elena's, a separate device that had, in the week before her disappearance, been in proximity to her, at the house, at the grocery store she'd visited on the Saturday before she disappeared, at the coffee shop in Westlake, where she sometimes worked on weekend mornings. A phone that had been close enough to Elena, repeatedly and in different locations, to suggest deliberate proximity rather than coincidence. This phone, like the one that had called Elena on the morning of her disappearance, was a prepaid burner, purchased in Dallas. Briggs told Cole about this on a Tuesday morning in April, 3 months after Elena had walked off the security camera, sitting in the same spot at the kitchen island, with the same careful, surgical containment of a man who had learned to deliver information that could shatter people without shattering the investigation. Someone was watching her, Cole said. Someone was establishing patterns, Briggs said, learning her routines. The locations are consistent with someone who was mapping her weekly schedule, where she went, when, how long she stayed, whether she was ever alone. Cole put both hands flat on the kitchen island. The granite was cold. He was aware of an anger rising in him that was larger and darker than anything he had felt since the night he'd first understood she was really gone. Not just missing, not just late, but gone. Someone planned this, Cole said. Someone spent weeks planning this. Yes, Briggs said. And nobody saw them. Elena may have, Briggs said very carefully. We don't know what she knew. We don't know what that phone call told her, or what she understood about her situation in those final minutes. Cole thought about Elena at the coffee shop on a Saturday morning. Laptop open, reading glasses on, the specific quality of concentration she brought to everything. He thought about whether she had looked up from her screen at some point and noticed someone. Whether she had felt something. Whether she had known, in some way he would never be able to ask her about, that something was wrong. She was smart, he said, to nobody in particular. She was the smartest person I knew. Briggs was quiet. Find who was in Dallas, Cole said. That's where the phones were bought. Start there. We're already there, Briggs said. The 4th month brought the media surge. The story had been circulating since January. The billionaire's wife, the beautiful house, the mysterious disappearance. But it had been a regional story, an Austin story, until a long-form piece in The Atlantic reframed it as something larger. The piece was called The Vanishing, and it was a careful, sympathetic examination of Elena Morrow's life, her career, her marriage, the house she had built in Westlake Hills, and the absence she had left behind. The writer had interviewed Patricia Walsh, Elena's mother, who had come to Austin in the first week and had not left. Cole had set her up in the guest wing of the house, and they had been living in parallel grief for 3 months. The mother and the husband of the same missing woman, tethered to each other by the one person who connected them, and by the specific, suffocating experience of not knowing. Patricia was 64, a retired music teacher from Nashville, and she was, Cole had come to understand in those months the person from whom Elena had inherited her particular quality of precise, unhurried attention. Patricia noticed everything and said little of what she noticed, and Cole had the sense, occasionally, of being quietly evaluated, not unkindly, but honestly, in the way of a woman who was conserving her energy for what mattered and did not have patience for anything else. She had not mentioned Serena. He did not know whether this was because she didn't know, or because she had decided not to, and the uncertainty of that sat in him like something with mass. The Atlantic piece ran in May. Within a week, the story was national. Within 2, it was international. Elena Moro's face, the photograph from their 3rd anniversary trip to Costa Rica, which her brother James had provided to Sandra Pierce's department, and which had subsequently become the image attached to every story, was on the front page of papers from New York to London. She was 37 years old. She was a forensic accountant. She had green eyes and dark hair, and she had made coffee on the morning she disappeared, and she had been missing for 4 months. Cole gave one press statement, on the advice of both Sandra Pierce and Thomas Briggs, which he read from a paper in the driveway of the Westlake Hills house, with Patricia standing beside him. He asked for information. He offered a reward that he subsequently tripled. He said, toward the end, in a voice that he had meant to keep controlled and could not quite manage, "I just want her home. That's the only thing." The video of the statement went everywhere. Serena watched it from her apartment in Dallas and called him immediately after. "That was brave," she said. "You did well." He thanked her. He did not wonder, then, why the word brave sat in him slightly wrong. The way a picture frame sits slightly wrong on a wall, not enough to fix, just enough to notice and then move past. He did not wonder. He was learning not to wonder about things that made him uncomfortable. He had been learning that for 8 months now, and he was getting better at it, and it was the worst skill he had ever developed. The 5th and 6th months were a particular kind of hell that Cole would later describe to a therapist, in the year after everything ended, as suspension, the feeling of being held at a fixed point of not knowing, neither moving toward resolution nor away from it, simply waiting in a condition that had ceased to feel temporary and had begun to feel, sickeningly, like the new permanent. Sandra Pierce's investigation continued. Briggs's continued. The Dallas lead on the burner phones had produced a dead end, a convenience store, a cash transaction, a clerk who remembered nothing specific about the buyer, but it had established a geography, a starting point, and Briggs had begun, with the patience of a man who had made a career of patience, to build outward from it. Serena came to Austin for what she framed as a work visit in June and stayed, at Cole's invitation, in the house. He would mark this, later, as the moment he had most completely stopped seeing clearly. Not because anything visible happened. Nothing did. Not in the way of dramatic wrongness. But because inviting her into the house that Elena had built was an act of a man who had ceased, however unconsciously, to hold the boundary between the life he should have been fighting for and the life he had chosen instead. Patricia Walsh left the morning after Serena arrived. She said she needed to go home to Nashville for a few days. She hugged Cole at the door with the care of someone handling something fragile, and she looked at him for a moment with the green eyes that were so precisely Elena's that the sight of them had never stopped being a small violence. She did not say anything about Serena. She did not have to. He stood in the driveway and watched her car pull away and felt something he could not quite name. Something between shame and the particular grief of a man who knows he is doing wrong and cannot find the part of himself capable of stopping. He went back inside. Serena was in the kitchen, making coffee. The sight of it landed on him like a physical thing. She was standing at the machine, and the carafe was filling, and the specific morning light was the same morning light that had been there on the Tuesday in January when Elena had done this same thing. And he stood in the doorway and experienced a moment of such complete and devastating clarity that his hands went cold. It lasted perhaps for seconds. And then Serena turned and smiled. And the moment passed, and he walked into the kitchen, and he let it pass. He would think about those 4 seconds for a very long time. The 7th month brought Thomas Briggs to Cole's office at Morrow Technologies with a manila folder and the expression of a man who has found something he is not yet sure what to do with. "I need to ask you some questions," Briggs said, "about Serena Voss." Cole went still. "Why?" "The Dallas geography on the burner phones. I've been building outward from it for 2 months. Briggs opened the folder. "Meridian Strategies has an office in Dallas. Serena Voss is based out of that office. Half the city of Dallas is based in that area of Dallas, Cole said. His voice came out flat, careful, performing a steadiness he was not fully feeling. Yes, Briggs said. But Serena Voss also traveled to Austin 3 times in the 6 weeks before Elena disappeared. Business trips. She stayed at the Four Seasons. He paused. She used the hotel gym twice a week. The hotel gym has an entrance that faces onto the trail system along Barton Creek. Elena ran that trail twice a week. The room was very quiet. You're saying she could have seen Elena. I'm saying she was in proximity. I'm not saying anything beyond that yet. Briggs looked at him steadily. Cole, you were involved with Serena before Elena disappeared. Yes. Did Serena know about Elena's routines? Her schedule? Places she went? Cole thought about 8 months of hotel suites and phone calls and the specific intimacy of an affair. The way you talked in those unguarded hours. The things you said without thinking. The things he might have mentioned. Elena runs every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Elena has this coffee shop she goes to on Saturdays. Elena is the most routine person I know. Had he said those things? Had he offered the architecture of his wife's life to this woman across a hotel bed, casually, without understanding what he was handing over? He could not remember. The not remembering was its own kind of answer. I need to think, he said. Cole, Briggs said, and something in his voice shifted, something more human, underneath the professionalism. I need you to think carefully and tell me the truth. All of it. Whatever you told her, whatever she knew. I need you to think back and tell me. Cole looked at the manila folder on his desk. He thought about Serena calling every day. Serena arriving at the house in June. Serena standing in Elena's kitchen making coffee in Elena's morning light. He thought about the word brave. He thought about the 4 seconds in the kitchen doorway and the clarity he had let pass. Give me the night, he said. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Briggs held his gaze for a moment, then nodded and stood. At the door he stopped. Cole, whatever she did, and I'm not yet certain of what that is, you are not responsible for it. He said it with the careful precision of a man who had thought about how to say it. But you are going to have to stop protecting her, even unconsciously, even by not looking. He opened the door. Look. He left. Cole sat alone in his office for a long time. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Austin spread out below him in the late afternoon light. The city he'd built a company in, the city where he'd brought Elena, the city where she had made a home, and then vanished from on a cold Tuesday morning that he had spent in a hotel suite 9 months ago. 9 months. He thought about what Thomas Briggs had said. Whatever she did. He reached for his phone, scrolled to Serena's name, looked at the string of daily messages, the support, the consistency, the careful, patient architecture of a woman who had been present through every day of his worst 9 months without once giving him a reason to look too closely at why. He thought about the prepaid phones purchased in Dallas. He thought about a woman who had decided what she wanted and had never, in her life, permitted anything to stand between herself and the thing she wanted. And for the first time in 9 months, in the 7th month, in the failing October light of his Austin office, Cole Morrow looked, really looked, and what he saw there, in the sudden terrible clarity of a man whose eyes have finally opened, sent a cold that had nothing to do with the season moving through him from his chest to his hands. He set the phone face down on the desk. He did not call Serena that night. It was the first night in 9 months that he didn't. She called him at 9. He watched the phone ring. He let it go to voicemail. She called again at 9:45. He lay in the dark of the bedroom that had been their bedroom, Elena's and his, and he stared at the ceiling and thought about a forensic accountant with a mind like a fine instrument, precise and patient, capable of finding the single dishonest thread in 1,000 pages of legitimate numbers and pulling it until the whole false construction came apart. She was the smartest person I knew. I know, he said, to the dark, to the ceiling, to nobody, to Elena, wherever she was. I should have known too. He picked up the phone and called Thomas Briggs. I'm ready to talk, he said, when Briggs answered on the second ring. I'll come now, Briggs said. Bring everything, Cole said. Everything you have on her. I'll bring everything I have on me. He got up, turned the lights on, went to the kitchen and made coffee because it was going to be a long night, and because, for a reason he couldn't fully articulate, but that had everything to do with the specific, ordinary dignity of the gesture. It felt important to make it himself. The carafe filled. He stood at the kitchen window and watched the Austin lights below, and he felt the 9 months of not looking collapsing in on themselves. And beneath the collapse, beneath the shame and the grief and the reckoning that was only just beginning, he felt something that he had not felt since the morning he had stood in this kitchen and understood that Elena was gone. He felt like a man who was finally, at catastrophic cost, beginning to see. Thomas Briggs arrived at 11 that night with a leather briefcase. 2 associates Cole had never met, and the specific, loaded quiet of a man who had been waiting for this conversation for longer than he had let on. They spread everything across the dining room table. The table Elena had chosen, a 10-seat reclaimed oak piece she'd found at an estate sale in the hill country, and refinished herself over a long weekend while Cole was in Washington for meetings. He had come home to find her in paint-stained jeans with her hair up, deeply satisfied with herself, and he had stood in the doorway and thought, "This is who she is. This is exactly who she is." He stood at the head of that table now and looked at the evidence of what had been done to her. "Talk me through Serena," Briggs said. "From the beginning. Everything." Cole talked for 2 hours. He gave Briggs the timeline of the affair, every Austin trip, every Dallas meeting, every conversation he could reconstruct. He told him about the things he'd shared, casually, without thinking: Elena's running schedule, the coffee shop, the Barton Creek Trail. The way he described their marriage in those unguarded hours. Things aren't bad. We're just in different places right now. The specific vocabulary of a man rationalizing a betrayal to the woman he was betraying his wife with. He gave Briggs all of it. It was the most honest he had been in over a year. She asked questions, Cole said, toward the end of the second hour. The coffee had gone cold. Nobody had touched the cups. I didn't register it as questioning at the time. It felt like interest. Like she was listening. He paused. She was always asking about Elena. Briggs looked up. Not aggressively. Just woven into conversation. How does Elena feel about your travel schedule? Does Elena ever get lonely in that big house? Is Elena happy? I thought she was. He stopped. The word he'd been about to use was jealous, and the inadequacy of it, in this room, on this table, landed on him like something collapsing. I thought she was processing the situation. I didn't understand she was building a picture. She was building a picture, Briggs said. And you handed her the canvas. Cole said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. Sandra Pierce received Thomas Briggs's full intelligence package on a Thursday morning in late October and read it in her office with the door closed and the focused attention of a woman who had been working this case for 9 months and had just been handed the thread she'd been looking for. She called Cole directly that afternoon. The phone purchased in Dallas, she said, without preamble. We were looking at the wrong geography. We were looking at who was in that neighborhood. We should have been looking at who had a reason to be in Austin before the disappearance and a connection to Dallas. Briggs told you about Serena. He did. A pause. I need to ask you something directly, Mr. Morrow, and I need the same answer you gave Briggs last night. Ask it. Is there anything Serena said to you in the days before Elena disappeared, or in the days immediately after, that seemed wrong at the time and that you dismissed? Cole sat with it. He had been sitting with this question, in one form or another, since Briggs had left at 2 in the morning. He had not slept. He had been moving through the architecture of the last 9 months, room by room, looking at everything he had walked past. The first week, he said, when I drove back from Austin, from the hotel to the house, I called her on the drive. He exhaled. I was panicking. I told her Elena was missing, that I'd gotten the call from Derek. He paused. She was calm. Calm. Completely. She said the right things. I'm so sorry. This must be terrifying. What do you need? But her voice. He'd been carrying this for 9 months without knowing it, and saying it aloud was the strange, vertiginous experience of naming something that had always been there. Her voice was already settled, like she was performing concern that she'd already prepared. He paused. I thought I was imagining it. I was in shock. I told myself I was projecting. You weren't imagining it, Sanders said. He closed his eyes. I'm going to need you to stay close to your phone, Sanders said. And I'm going to need you to do something very difficult. What? I need you to keep acting normally with Serena. Return her calls. Be present. Don't change anything. A pause. Can you do that? Cole thought about the phone that had rung at 9 and 9:45. The voicemail she would have left. The follow-up text, which he had not yet opened, which was sitting in his phone like something with teeth. Yes, he said. This is important, Mr. Morrow. We are close. But close is not enough. We need her to not know we're close. I understand. He ended the call. Opened the text from Serena. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Call me when you can. I'm here. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he typed, sorry, rough night. Talk tomorrow. He set the phone down. Felt something move through him. Not quite nausea. Not quite fury. Something that combined the two into a feeling that had no clean name. He went to the kitchen. Poured the cold coffee out. Made a fresh pot. Stood at the window. We are close. What Sandra Pierce had not told Cole, because she was, above all else, a careful woman, was how close. The Dallas lead had broken open in the previous 72 hours in a way that transformed the investigation from a 9-month accumulation of circumstantial geography into something with the beginning of a structural shape. A woman named Carla Diaz, 29, a former employee at Meridian Strategies who had been terminated 18 months ago following a workplace dispute, had contacted the Austin PD tip line in response to the national press coverage. She had seen the Atlantic piece. She had sat on what she knew for 2 weeks, running the calculus of loyalty and conscience that people in her position ran, and she had finally made the call. What she told Sandra Pierce's team over 3 hours of recorded interview would form, in the case file, the first piece of testimony that placed Serena Voss in direct connection to the disappearance. Carla Diaz had not witnessed anything specific, but she had, in her final month at Meridian, overheard a phone call, Serena's office, door slightly ajar, Carla passing in the corridor, in which Serena had been speaking to someone Carla did not recognize. The conversation had been brief, lowered, and concluded with a sentence that Carla had thought strange enough to mention to a colleague at the time and had not forgotten since. It needs to happen before the contract closes. After that, he'll have no reason to finalize anything. The contract. The Pentagon contract, Morrow Technologies' largest, the one that had been in the closing stages in January. The one that Cole had told Serena would change the company's trajectory permanently. After that, he'll have no reason to finalize anything. Sandra Pierce read the transcript of Carla Diaz's interview and understood, with the cold clarity of a detective who had worked a missing persons case for 9 months, what the sentence meant. Serena had not wanted Elena dead. She had wanted her removed. Cleanly, completely, in a way that left Cole devastated and available, grieving a wife who was simply gone, with no body, no verdict, no closure. Grieving a wife who could be, over months and years, quietly replaced by the person who had been there through every terrible day of the not knowing. She had wanted the marriage ended without the divorce. She had wanted Cole's guilt and grief as the foundation of whatever came next. It was, Sandra thought, with a revulsion she was professionally trained not to show, one of the most coldly constructed plans she had encountered in 22 years. And it had almost worked. Cole returned Serena's call the following afternoon. He had spent the morning on the phone with Sandra and Briggs, understanding the shape of what was forming, and then he had gone to his home office and sat for 20 minutes in silence, preparing himself for the specific performance of a man who was learning to use compartmentalization for something other than self-protection. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said. Warm. Steady. The voice of a woman who had been patient for 9 months and was still patient, because she understood the length of the game she was playing. Hey, Cole said. Sorry about last night. Don't apologize. You don't owe me anything. A pause. How are you doing? Really? He looked out the window of the home office. The same window Elena used to work beside, laptop open, reading glasses on, finding the single dishonest thread in 1,000 pages of legitimate numbers. He thought about the word brave. He thought about a phone purchased with cash in Dallas. He thought about what Briggs had said. She had decided what she wanted and had never permitted anything to stand between herself and the thing she wanted. I'm okay, Cole said. I've been thinking a lot. About Elena? About everything, he said. About what I might have missed. A half-second of silence. So brief he would not have caught it 2 months ago. He caught it now. You haven't missed anything, Serena said, smooth and immediate. You've done everything you could. Maybe, Cole said. I'm not sure. He kept his voice easy, unrevealing. He was discovering, in real time, that he was better at this than he'd thought, which was its own grim education, because it confirmed that the skill had been there all along, only previously deployed in the wrong direction. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. I'll be here, she said. He ended the call, sat with the phone in his hand. 9 months ago, he had been a man who did not look at the things that made him uncomfortable. He had practiced not looking with such discipline that it had become invisible to him. Seamless, automatic, the architecture of a man who had traded his greatest treasure for his worst mistake and had needed, for reasons of simple psychological survival, to not fully understand what he had done. He was looking now, and somewhere, in a location that Thomas Briggs was, at this specific moment, working to identify with the systematic patience of a man who had once spent 11 months finding a single piece of evidence that broke a federal case. Elena Morrow was alive. He did not know this as fact. He knew it the way he had known, in this kitchen 9 months ago, that she had not left him voluntarily. The way you know the things that matter, when you finally stop looking away. Drop a comment below. Do you think Cole deserves a second chance? I read every single one. Elena Morrow was found on a Tuesday. Cole would register this detail later, the specific, symmetrical cruelty of it. She had disappeared on a Tuesday. She came back on one. As if the universe, in its indifference, had a sense of structure, if not of mercy. Thomas Briggs called at 6:41 in the morning. Cole was already awake. He had not been sleeping past 5 for weeks now, his body having apparently decided that rest was something that happened to other people. Standing at the kitchen window with coffee going cold in his hand, watching the November dark over the hill country give way to the gray suggestion of dawn. "We have her," Briggs said. Cole put his hand on the counter. "Say that again." "We have her, Cole. She's alive." The coffee mug hit the counter with a sound he didn't hear. He was already moving. She had been held in a rented property outside Fredericksburg, 70 miles west of Austin, deep in the hill country. A limestone farmhouse on 12 isolated acres that had been leased under a false name 8 months before Elena disappeared. The man who had made the call on the Tuesday morning, who had told Elena, in a voice she would later describe to investigators as professionally calm, like someone reading from a script, that her husband had been in a serious accident and was asking for her at a private clinic, that a car was waiting, that there was no time. That man had been found 48 hours earlier in a motel outside San Marcos, following a financial trail that Briggs's team had been pulling loose thread by thread. For 3 weeks. He was a private contractor named Roy Hess, 51, former military, whose connection to Serena Voss ran through 2 shell companies and a cash payment structure that had been constructed with genuine sophistication and had ultimately, as sophisticated structures tend to, left a trail. He had kept Elena alive. Cole would never fully understand this. The specific mercy of a man capable of what Hess had done, choosing not to do worse. But Hess was, as it emerged, a man who had understood his assignment as containment, not harm, and who had, when the walls began closing, made the calculation that cooperation was his only remaining currency. Elena had been alone in the farmhouse for 9 months. Federal unharmed physically, and completely, deliberately isolated. No phone, no news, no contact with the outside world. A woman held in suspension while the man who loved her was slowly, carefully repositioned towards someone else. She had known, from approximately the 3rd month, that the accident story was false. She had spent the remaining 6 months surviving. Cole arrived at the Fredericksburg property behind a convoy of APD vehicles and Briggs's team and did not wait for anyone to tell him it was cleared. He was out of the car before it fully stopped and moving toward the farmhouse door, and the officer who started to step into his path took one look at his face and stepped aside. She was sitting at a wooden table in the kitchen when he came through the door. 9 months. She was thinner. There were shadows under her eyes that had not been there before and a quality to her stillness that was different, more deliberate, more structural, the stillness of a person who had learned to be still as a survival mechanism rather than a natural state. But she was Elena. The reading glasses were on the table beside her. She had been writing, on a legal pad, in the small, precise handwriting he would have recognized at 1,000 yards. She was wearing a gray sweater he didn't recognize. Her hair was longer. She looked up when he came through the door. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, and then he was on his knees in front of her chair, and his face was in his hands, and he was not, for the first time in 9 months, performing anything at all. "I know," she said quietly. Her hand came to the back of his head. "Cole, I know." He could not speak for a long time. She let him not speak. It was, he would think later, the most Elena thing she could have done, The patience of a woman who understood that some things needed to move at their own pace, that the attempt to manage them only made them worse. She simply held him while he came apart in her kitchen, in front of Sandra Pierce's team and Briggs's associates and 2 paramedics, and she did not rush any of it. When he finally raised his head and looked at her, she looked back with the green eyes that her mother had given her and that he had seen in Patricia's face every day of the 9 months she'd spent in this house, and she said, "I need you to tell me the truth. All of it." "Yes," he said. "All of it." "Not here," she said. "Not now?" "But soon." "Soon," he agreed. She nodded once. Then she picked up his hand with both of hers, and held it, and looked at the paramedic who had appeared in the doorway. "I'm ready," she said. She stood up. She was steady on her feet, steadier than he was. She picked up the legal pad from the table before she moved, tucking it under her arm with the instinct of a woman who had been writing for 9 months and was not about to leave it behind. He would learn, later, that it was the 4th pad she'd filled. 370 pages of notes, observations, memories, and the specific, meticulous documentation of a forensic accountant who had decided, somewhere in the 3rd month, that the best use of her captivity was to become her own case file. She had documented everything Hess had done, said, every pattern and inconsistency, building the case against her own disappearance with the patient precision of the best professional mind Cole had ever known. Sandra Pierce, when she received those legal pads, would call them the single most valuable piece of evidence in the case. Serena Voss was arrested at her Dallas apartment at 9:17 that same Tuesday morning. Sandra Pierce had timed it deliberately. Elena found, secured, and in medical care before the arrest was executed, eliminating any remaining leverage. Serena opened the door in workout clothes, a coffee mug in her hand, and took 3 seconds to understand what she was looking at before the composure arrived. The specific, controlled composure of a woman who had prepared for contingencies. "I'd like to call my attorney," she said. "Of course," Sandra said. Serena was charged that afternoon with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and criminal stalking. The financial trail connecting her to Roy Hess, 2 shell companies, a series of cash transfers routed through a lobbying firm account she controlled, was, in the words of the federal prosecutor who would later take the case, almost insultingly clear once you knew where to look. Cole was told about the arrest by Briggs, who called while Cole was sitting in a hospital waiting room in Fredericksburg watching Elena's doctor walk toward him with an expression that was, finally, not the expression of someone delivering bad news. He registered the information about Serena the way you register something you already knew, not as shock, but as a door closing, the sound of a thing ending. "Thank you," he said to Briggs. "For everything. Bring her home," Briggs said, and hung up. The reckoning, when it came quietly. Not in the hospital. Not in the first days, which were medical and logistical and surrounded by the necessary machinery of reentry into a world Elena had been absent from for 9 months. Patricia Walsh arrived from Nashville and held her daughter for a long time without speaking, and James Walsh flew in from Denver, and the reunion of the Walsh family was the kind of thing Cole witnessed from a respectful distance, understanding that he was present in that room on a grace he had not earned. It came a week later, in the Westlake Hills house, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, and Elena was sitting in the living room she had built with the legal pad on her lap, and the specific quality of readiness that he had come to understand meant she was prepared to say the true thing. He sat across from her. "Tell me," she said. He told her. All of it. The affair, the timeline, the specific architecture of what he had chosen and chosen again over 8 months of incremental surrender. He told her what he had given Serena, the details of Elena's life, her routines, her schedule, without understanding what he was handing over. He told her about the 4 seasons, about the morning she disappeared, about where he had been and what he had been doing while she made coffee alone in their kitchen. He told her about the 9 months, Serena's calls, the visits, the 6 seconds in the kitchen doorway when he had seen clearly and let the clarity pass. He told her about the night he had finally looked. He did not defend any of it. He did not contextualize or mitigate or reach for the internal narratives he had spent a year constructing. He simply told her the truth, at the pace the truth required, and when he was finished the room was very quiet, and Elena was looking at him with an expression he could not fully read, which was, he understood, entirely appropriate, because he had forfeited the right to read her easily. "I know you loved me," she said finally. "I knew it the whole time. That was the hardest part, knowing that, and being here anyway." He said nothing. "I don't know what I'm going to do with any of this yet," she said. "I need you to understand that. I cannot tell you tonight what this becomes. I can only tell you that I'm here, and I'm going to figure it out, and I need you to not rush me." "I won't," he said, "and I need you to understand something." Her voice was quiet and precise and utterly without performance. "I survived 9 months in that house because I refused to stop believing that my life was worth getting back to. Not because of you. Because of me." She held his gaze. "Whatever we figure out, whatever this becomes, that's where it starts. With me knowing that." "Yes," Cole said. "Good," Elena said. She picked up the legal pad, opened it to a blank page, and in the specific, precise handwriting of a woman who had documented her own captivity and was now, on her own terms, beginning the next chapter, she wrote something at the top of the page that Cole could not see from where he was sitting. He did not ask what it was. He was learning, finally, not to take what wasn't offered, to wait, to pay attention, to earn, one day at a time, the right to be trusted with the things that mattered. Elena is home. Serena faces justice. And Cole has to figure out if redemption is something you can actually build or just something you hope for. Drop a comment below. Do you think Elena should give Cole another chance, or has too much been broken? Every comment gets read. Healing, Elena would tell her therapist in the months that followed, was not a single decision. People wanted it to be. They wanted the moment, the conversation, the tearful reunion, the cinematic beat where the music swelled and the choice was made, and everything that came after flowed from that one clear point of transformation. They wanted the before and the after with a clean line between them. There was no clean line. There was Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then the Thursday where she woke at 3 in the morning with her heart slamming against her ribs, and the specific bodily terror of a woman whose nervous system had not yet received the message that she was safe. There was the Friday she stood in the kitchen and could not make coffee, could not stand at that machine, in that light, without her hands beginning to shake, and had to leave the room and sit on the back porch in the November cold until the shaking stopped. There was the Saturday Cole found her on the porch and sat beside her without speaking, and she let him, and neither of them said anything for a long time, and that was, in its modest and imperfect way, something. Recovery was not a moment. It was an accumulation. It was the slow, unglamorous work of a woman rebuilding her nervous system, her sense of safety, her relationship with her own life. One ordinary day stacked on top of another until the stack became, gradually, something she could stand on. Elena was exceptionally good at work. She returned to it 6 weeks after coming home. Not the firm, not yet, but her own cases, the legal pads, the patient reconstruction of dishonest systems. Her therapist, a woman named Dr. Rains who had the quality of someone who had heard everything and was not frightened by any of it, said that the work was good for her. That the act of finding hidden truth in other people's broken structures was, for Elena, a form of agency. A reminder of what her mind could do. Elena did not disagree. She also, in the quiet of the home office, continued writing. Not the case file that had been handed to Sandra Pierce and subsequently to the federal prosecutor's office, where it was doing the work it had been built to do. Something else. The 9 months, from the inside. What it had felt like to be held in suspension while the world continued without her. What she had thought about. What she had held on to. She did not know yet what it was. She was not ready to know. She wrote it anyway. Serena Voss's trial began in March of the following year. The federal case, built on the financial trail, Carla Diaz's testimony, Roy Hess's full cooperation, and Elena's 370 pages of documented evidence, was one of the more comprehensively constructed criminal conspiracy prosecutions the Western District of Texas had seen in a decade. The prosecutor, a precise and relentless woman named Assistant U.S. Attorney Diana Marsh, described Serena in her opening statement as a woman who treated another person's life as an obstacle to be managed, and who had deployed intelligence, resources, and patience in the service of something that had no name in polite language and several in the criminal code. Serena maintained her composure throughout. She was, to the end, the woman who had decided what she wanted, controlled, precise, projecting a confidence that the evidence was systematically dismantling around her like scaffolding pulled away from a building that turned out to have nothing structural inside. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 19 years. Cole attended every day of the trial. He sat in the gallery and he did not look away from any of it. Not the financial exhibits, not Carla Diaz's testimony, not the recordings of Serena's own calls played for the jury, not the moment the verdict was read. He had made a decision, sometime in the weeks between Elena's return and the trial's beginning, that looking away was a thing he was no longer willing to do. Not from the trial, not from what he had done, not from what it had cost. Elena did not attend. She had given her testimony to the federal prosecutor's office in a deposition that Diana Marsh described, privately, as the most thorough witness statement she had encountered in 20 years of prosecution. She had done her part. She did not need to sit in a courtroom and watch the consequences of Serena's choices unfold in real time. She had her own consequences to work through, her own rebuilding to do. She was home when Cole returned from the verdict. She was in the living room with Dr. Raines's most recent book and a cup of tea, and she looked up when he came through the door and read his face with the precision of a woman who had spent years learning to read hidden things. Guilty, she said. All counts, he said. 19 years. She nodded once. Something moved across her face, not triumph, not relief exactly. Something quieter and more complicated. The expression of a woman filing something away. Okay, she said, and she went back to her book. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen and made tea and brought it back and sat across from her. And they were quiet together in the living room that she had built. And outside, the hill country winter was finally beginning to turn towards something that resembled spring. The question Cole's therapist, a man named Dr. Alan Foss, recommended by Dr. Raines with the frank acknowledgement that Cole needed someone who specialized in the specific intersection of moral failure and grief, returned to, repeatedly, across their sessions in that first year, was not whether Cole had loved Elena. That was never the question. The question was why love had not been enough to make him present. Why the thing he valued most had been the thing he most consistently failed to protect. What it meant to be capable of genuine love and genuine blindness simultaneously, and whether understanding the mechanism of the blindness was the same as being cured of it. Cole did not have clean answers. He had the beginning of an understanding, which Foss seemed to consider sufficient progress for a man 11 months into a process that did not have a fixed endpoint. What he had, more concretely, was behavior. He came home. He was present in the rooms he was in. He stopped managing the distance between himself and the difficult thing and started sitting with the difficult thing instead, because Foss had told him that the distance was the problem, had always been the problem, and he had recognized the truth of it with the particular, visceral recognition of a man hearing something he already knew and had been avoiding. He told Elena the truth when she asked questions, and he asked questions when he wanted to understand, and he waited for the answers rather than constructing the answers he preferred and presenting them as fact. He paid attention. He was not redeemed. He understood. Now, that redemption was not a destination, not a place you arrived at where the ledger balanced and the debt was cleared. It was the daily practice of being a different person than the one who had made the original choice. It was the accumulation of different decisions, stacked one on top of another, until the stack became something a person could stand on. He was building the stack. On a Saturday morning in April, 15 months after Elena came home, she made coffee. He was still in bed when he heard it. The specific sounds of the kitchen coming to life, the water running, the machine starting. He lay there for a moment listening to it with the full, focused attention of a man who understood, finally, the weight of ordinary things. He got up, went to the kitchen. She was standing at the window in the morning light, waiting for the carafe to fill, and she turned when she heard him, and her expression was neither welcoming nor unwelcoming. It was simply present, the expression of a woman who was here, in her kitchen, in her life, making choices she had earned the right to make. There's enough for two, she said. Thank you, he said. He got 2 mugs from the cabinet, set them on the counter beside her, stood at the window with her while the coffee finished, looking out at the hill country morning, the limestone and the cedar, and the pale spring light moving across the hills she had chosen when she had chosen this house, this life, this city. They did not talk. They stood together in the ordinary quiet of a Saturday morning, and the coffee finished, and she poured it, and she handed him a mug, and he took it with both hands. Outside, The spring was doing what spring did. The slow, unglamorous, necessary work of turning over. Inside, two people stood in a kitchen that had been the site of a loss and was, on this specific Saturday, the site of something that did not yet have a name, but was present and real and theirs, if they chose to keep building it. Elena turned back to the window. Cole stood beside her. He paid attention. If this story moved you, if Elena stayed with you, if Cole's reckoning hit different, if Serena made your blood run cold, drop a comment below and tell me which moment got you the most. I read every single one, and your comments are what makes me keep writing. Share this with someone who needs a story that reminds them what it costs to stop paying attention and what it takes to earn your way back. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.